When people think of UFO crashes, they often think of the Roswell incident. But just outside of Kingman, Arizona in 1953, a story began that has remained in the background for decades. A reported crash, a military response, and claims that what was recovered wasn't human. While this story may not be as well known as Roswell, some researchers argue it might just be as significant and one of the most detailed UFO accounts ever recorded. With renewed government interest in UFO reports in recent years, and more records set to be publicly released any day now, it raises a question that still hasn't been fully answered. What actually happened in Kingman of May 1953, and why is it still being debated about today? Much of what is known about this event comes from a man by the alias of Fritz Werner. Werner confided his knowledge and experience to popular UFO investigator Raymond Fowler in 1973. Who would then document this information in his book. Since said information was sworn to be kept secret, the alias of Fritz Werner was created and used to sign the following document. I, Fritz Werner, do solemnly swear that during a special assignment with the U.S. Air Force on May 21st, 1953, I assisted in the investigation of a crashed unknown object in the vicinity of Kingman, Arizona. The object was constructed of an unfamiliar metal, which resembled brushed aluminum. It has impacted 20 inches into the sand without any sign of structural damage. It was oval and about 30 feet in diameter. An entranceway hatch had been vertically lowered and opened. It was about 3.5 feet high and 1.5 feet wide. I was able to talk briefly to someone on the team who did look inside only briefly. He saw 2 swivel seats, an oval cabin, and a lot of instruments and displays. A tent pinched near the object sheltered the remains of the only occupant of the crash. It was about 4 feet tall, dark brown complexion, and had 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, and a small round mouth. It was clothed in a silvery metallic suit and wore a skull cap of the same type material. It wore no face covering or helmet. This document was then certified with Werner's signature, with Fowler as the witness. It was later revealed the true identity of Werner was Arthur Stansel, a scientist who worked at the nearby nuclear test site in Nevada, and also on Project Blue Book, a U.S. Air Force program that investigated UFO sightings between 1952 and 1969. But Stansel's account isn't the only one tied to this area. Over the years, some researchers have suggested that there may have been more than one incident near Kingman in May of 1953. Some accounts describe a second crash. Others even mention a third, with reported locations ranging from remote desert areas to the regions near the distant mountains. And this is where the story becomes even more controversial. Some individuals have claimed that not all of the occupants died in those crashes, and that both the crafts themselves and the surviving beings were taken to none other than Area 51. You'll find references to figures like Bill Uhouse and Dan Burish, who claim to have interacted with what we know are aliens.
That he not only studied the craft that allegedly crashed in Kingman, Arizona, but also had direct contact with J. Rod.
We had a long period of introduction into meeting, an alien. And I called him J. Rod. That's the name that the linguist gave him. And he would talk, but he'd sound just like, if you spoke, he'd sound like you. He's like one of these, a parrot, but he'd try and answer your question, Basically, it was only engineering advice or science advice.
Most recently, in April of 2024, reports even surfaced involving communications between Christopher Mellon, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, and an undisclosed individual he described as a senior U.S. government member. This conversation referenced Kingman specifically and suggested that there may be more known than what has been made public. One message in particular stated that those outside of this information would be slack-jawed if they knew what was currently understood. But, like much of the Kingman story, the details are limited and heavily redacted. So after decades of stories, claims, and investigations, there's still no clear answer to what actually happened near Kingman in 1953. Only a story that's been told, questioned, and debated about for decades. And a truth that, at least for now, remains just out of reach.